Chilhowee Hills family, is Pastor Chuck Morris, and I'm coming to you today through the technological means of video. And the reason we're doing that is because, as you know, we're at a very unusual year where we've got Christmas Day and New Year's Day falling on Sunday. And so what we're doing, and by the time you're seeing this video, no doubt we've already had our Christmas Day celebration, and I hope you had a great holiday. But we're going to, in lieu of having our Bible Fellowship classes meeting on Sunday, January 1st, we decided to do something a little bit different and send out a video. And so this is a video Bible Fellowship lesson. And what I'm going to ask you to do is take this video, which I hope will be 15 to 20 minutes, won't be as long as a normal Bible Fellowship class, but I want to encourage you to watch it and to send it out to people in your class. And let them watch that as well. We're going to send it out on a church-wide email, but you as Bible Fellowship teachers can really help us with this in addition. And what we want to do is prepare ourselves in this Bible Fellowship lesson, much like we would on a Sunday morning when we gather in our classes and we study God's Word and we spend time in prayer and we really prepare ourselves to enter into a time of worship that morning. We're going to do the same thing here, but we're going to do it obviously in a video format. But we're going to talk about what we're going to be doing on Sunday, January 1st as a church body during that worship time. I'm going to speak a little bit more to that at the end of this video, but I wanted to just really prepare us as we enter into this study so that our hearts will be in the right place and we're ready for a brand new year. Obviously, the new year brings up times of New Year's resolutions and that sort of thing. And we do want to think along those terms, but we don't want to think specifically resolutions. We want to look at in this lesson and then building up into what we do on Sunday morning the 1st at really spiritual renewal, spiritual revival, something that's new within us that gets us ready for a brand new 2017. And really asking ourselves, what can we do that will prepare us to make 2017 the best, not only for our church, but for our family and even for us as followers of Christ. And so that being said, we're going to, I'm going to ask you to turn in your Bibles to 2 Chronicles chapter 20. And I'm not going to read the whole passage because, again, I want to keep this just a bit abbreviated. I know it's tough for people to watch videos and to find time to do that, so I want to make it as brief as possible. But I want to just look at this particular account of one of the kings of Judah, a man named Jehoshaphat. As you know, this was the time of the divided kingdom. Judah was the southern kingdom. And the king at this time was a man named Jehoshaphat. We look in chapter 19 of 2 Chronicles, we can see that he was a man just like any of the other men, but as a king, he was one that did a pretty good job in the sight of the Lord, and really talks about verse 3 of chapter 19. He's given this commendation: "Nevertheless, good things are found in you, that you have removed the wooden images from the land and have prepared your heart to seek God." So that's the mindset Jehoshaphat has. He's got a mindset that he's preparing himself to seek God. Well, we skip to chapter 20, which is where I asked you to turn, and those first 9 verses really contain a pretty incredible story, and I think it's appropriate to where you and I are at today as believers. And I'm going to read this, but in essence, what we have is the king of Judah and his nation facing the potential of attack and the potential of someone coming in and destroying their land and overtaking them. And so I want to speak to that just a little bit, but let me read the beginning of this passage in chapter 20, starting in verse 1. "It happened after this that the people of Moab, with the people of Ammon and others with them besides the Ammonites," in other words, several different nations or countries, "they came to battle against Jehoshaphat. Then some came and told Jehoshaphat, saying, 'A great multitude is coming against you from beyond the sea, from Syria, and they are in Hazazon Tamar, which is En Gedi.'" If you've been with us to Israel, you know what that area is like and what a beautiful part of the nation that is. And so those first 2 verses tell us this, that the future was really scary and uncertain for Jehoshaphat and for his people. And granted, here we are in 2016, about to launch into 2017, and maybe our nation isn't under attack, but the reality is that when we come to these milestones, we tend to look forward. We tend to think about the future. What does tomorrow hold? And the new year is a great time to do that. We might ask ourselves, what will 2017 look like? What am I going to do? What are some good things that might happen? What are some dangers and perils that lurk ahead? And so in the same sense, even though we don't have various nations coming against us, it could be said that the future might be scary. It might be uncertain. After all, none of us know what tomorrow holds. And so we've got this brand new thing called 2017 that's facing us, and it's standing right there in front of us, and we're on the precipice of this. What is this year going to have for us? And so just like Jehoshaphat, we're facing something out there ahead of us that we're uncertain of. And in Jehoshaphat's case, he was filled with fear. He was consumed with this idea that I'm going to be under attack. And the people came and said, great hordes of people, multiple nations are coming against you. But I want to look at verse 3, because I think verse 3 really is a key when we see Jehoshaphat's actions. And I want to sort of parallel that with some instruction for you and I as we face the possible uncertainties of 2017. Verse 3 says this, and Jehoshaphat feared and set himself to seek the Lord. Listen to that. He feared. In other words, he understood his weakness. He understood that he had no control over the future. He understood that these uncertain times were something that were out there and were a real potential for him. And yet he does this. He set himself to seek the Lord. That's an interesting, some interesting phraseology there in the Hebrew. The idea of setting himself is it's a verb, and it's this idea of turning your face towards something. And so that's what we see with Jehoshaphat. This isn't just a casual decision. He didn't just say, you know what, I think God might have some wisdom in this. No, it says because of his fear, because of his trepidation, because of his uncertainty for the future, he made a conscious choice. He made the conscious effort to turn his face toward God. And again, that being a verb, there's action in there. The idea, the word that is translated as set is a word of action, and there's a lot of different translations or ways that word is translated into our English language. But it has this idea of giving or of moving something or placing something. There's action here. It's not a casual decision that Jehoshaphat is making. And of course, when we see that he set himself, it really indicates that he took that responsibility. It was a decision he made. He said, I need to make the effort myself consciously to turn my face toward God. Isn't that amazing? Nowhere do we read that he went through battle plans. Nowhere does it say that he sent out scouts. Most of those things probably did take place. But the first and foremost thing that Jehoshaphat did when he faced the uncertainty was he, again, made that conscious effort to turn his face toward God. And so, that being said, that's what I want to do with us as we think this week, or whatever day of the week that you're reading this lesson, as we get ready for the first. Now, you might view this video on Sunday morning the 1st before you go into worship, but you might view it on Saturday, or on Friday, or on Thursday, or whatever day of the week that you have time to watch the video. But as you're doing that, here's what we want to do. We want to pray and prepare ourselves as we lead up to our service on New Year's Day. And there's a couple things I want to say just very quickly about that, and I'm going to read some more verses here about what Jehoshaphat did, but I want to make sure that you're getting the connection. On January 1st, we've got planned a very special service. We're just calling it a prayer and praise service. And so what we're going to do, and without kind of letting the cat out of the bag, so to speak, we're going to have a mixture of music where we can worship and have corporate praise. And then we're going to take a break from that, and we're going to focus on a topic that we can pray about together as a church. And then we're going to take another break and do some more worship together. And then we're going to take another topic, and we're going to have some opportunity to move around the worship center to pray. And then we're going to use a third topic, or some more music, and then a third topic, which will give us an opportunity for our invitation and our time of response. It's going to be a little bit different service. But the reason we're doing this is because we really have the opportunity to take those first few hours of the morning of that first day of the year. And I'm talking about after the sun comes up, but really from 10:30 until 11:30. One of the very first things we can do as we usher in that new year is really spend our time as a church in God's house in prayer and in praise. two of the most important things that we can do as we ready ourselves for the uncertainty of what tomorrow holds and what this 2017 might look like. Again, 2017 may end up being the best year of your life, but 2017 may also be a year that brings you some surprises and some struggles that you're not even expecting. But as a church and as individuals, we need to be ready and we need to be prepared for what God may bring to us in 2017. It's going to be a great way to start. So let's look a little bit further at Jehoshaphat here. Here's what some of the things that he did. It says that he gathered people together to ask help from the Lord, and from all the cities of Judah they came to seek the Lord. So he begins to gather some support around him. In other words, to come together as a congregation like we're going to do on the first. He said he stood in the assembly of Judah in Jerusalem in the house of the Lord before the new court. And he says this in verse 6. He said, O Lord God of our fathers, are you not God in heaven, and do you not rule over the kingdoms of the nations? And in your hand is there not power and might, so that no one is able to withstand you? Now, he's not asking those questions out of confusion. God, are you not mighty? He's using the question format to make a point. God, are you not the greatest? Are you not mighty? And so the first thing that Jehoshaphat is doing, and I believe is very critical to us even this week as we prepare, is to be reminded of this, reminded of who God is. Listen to that. God of our fathers, are you not God in heaven? Do you not rule over the kingdoms of the nations? Oh, well, of course the answers to those are yes. And in your hand is there not power and might, so that no one is able to withstand you? Well, isn't that a great verse to hold on to as we face possible uncertainties, as we face a new year that we just don't know what it holds for us? Be reminded, first of all, who God is. And then look in verses 7 and 8. The second thing Jehoshaphat does in his speech before the congregation, before the new court, he reminds the people what God has done. Look at verse 7 and 8. Are you not our God, who drove out the inhabitants of this land before you people Israel, and gave it to the descendants of Abraham, your friend, forever? And they dwell in it, and have built you a sanctuary in it for your name, and saying, it goes on, we'll look at that verse 9 in just a second. But he talks about the idea that God had chased the descendants, or the inhabitants of the land out, that the descendants of Abraham had come into that land and they came in to dwell. And he says, and there was a temple built for you to honor and glorify your name. And so he reminds them who God is, his strength, his power, his might, that he is God. And then he says, God, you've done a lot for us. Look at our past. We can look at what you have done in the past for us that benefits us. And we have this magnificent temple that stands as representation of your power and your presence and the focal point of our worship. And it keeps our eyes and our minds on you. So who God is and what God has done. And then going on, continuing into verse 9, he reminds them what God will do. This is what God says. If disaster comes upon us, sword, judgment, pestilence or famine, we will stand before this temple and in your presence, for your name is in this temple, and cry out to you our affliction, and you will hear and save. Isn't that amazing? Listen, he talks about this, the sword. He talks about an enemy, something that may come up against them from the outside. That was obviously the most pressing need. But Jehoshaphat didn't just keep it limited to that. He also says judgment. Judgment means usually punishment, some payback or consequence for actions. More often than not, that's divine in nature. And he says, God, you may bring judgment against us for our sins and for our actions. And that may come against us. He says pestilence, the idea of these natural attacks, not from mankind, but just the environment and the world that we live in. There may be attacks from locusts. There may be things that come upon us that we don't even see and can't even foretell. We might include disease in that category too. Some kind of a virus or some kind of thing that attacks. A kind of a natural attack is what he's talking about there. And then the final thing he mentions is famine, which of course water is the key to life. And he said famine may come upon us, and we may not be able to water our crops and water our animals and provide food for. He said all of these things can come against us. But in verse 9 he says, if any of these things that he describes as disaster comes upon us, we're going to gather together in your presence. We're going to do this in your temple, because this temple, he said, your name is in this temple, and we're going to cry out to you. And then he says this, you will hear and save. So that's a great thing for us to think about as we look at 2017. I don't know what it's going to look like for you. I don't know what it's going to look like for me. I don't know what kind of trouble we're going to have. I don't know if any of these kinds of attacks are going to come against us, because they come in so many different ways and shapes and forms, and the enemy does so much that he can do. It takes a lot of different avenues to come after us. But we need to remember this: who God is, what God has done, and what God has promised that he will do. That's a great way for us to focus our hearts and minds as we prepare to bring the congregation together on January 1st. I'm going to say one more thing. If you go back to verse 3, I didn't finish that verse on purpose. It says, Jehoshaphat feared and set himself to seek the Lord. But look at the second part. He proclaimed a fast throughout all Judah. So he individually took responsibility to set his face toward the Lord. But then he said to the people, we need to fast. Not just me as a leader, not just me as the great king of Judah, but all of us. We need to gather as a body, as a people, and we need to fast. I don't have time to really go into a fasting lesson, because again, I want to make this a relatively short video. But fasting can take on a lot of different forms. And what I want us to do, even to think about this week, is just challenge ourselves. Would you consider taking part in a fast between Christmas Day and the New Year's Day service? However you choose to do that. You may skip a meal. You may fast for a day. You may fast for a longer period than that. Fasts don't always have to do with food. You may have a regular TV show that you watch every Thursday night from 8 to 9. And you may say, God, I'm just going to set that show aside, and Thursday night from 8 to 9, I'm going to fast from that, and I'm going to spend that time with you. And really what we're doing with the fast is we're just setting aside something else that we do in life, and we are choosing purposely to focus our hearts upon God. In other words, we're doing what Jehoshaphat did. We're purposely making a conscious effort to turn our faces towards the Lord, to set our faces towards God, to seek what he would want. And so that's what I'm going to encourage you to do. I'm going to encourage you to consider a fast sometime between Christmas Day and when we come together as the congregation, as an assembly on January 1st. And as we do that, as God begins to work in our hearts and work in our lives and speak to us throughout that week, I believe that when we come together on the 1st, it's going to be an amazing day. I want you to come on January 1st. Not with the idea that you're just coming to a worship service, not with the idea that you want to just be entertained with a sermon, not with the idea that you want to hear great singing and performing for you. All of those things are always part of what we do when we gather. But I want you to come on January 1st with your heart and your face set toward the Lord. I want you to come with anticipation of God moving in that service. I want you to come knowing that you're going to be asked to move around the worship center and maybe to spend some time over here praying and some time with your family praying. I want you to come knowing that it's going to be a different service, in that it's not just going to be a music set and then a sermon, but it's going to be different. And I don't want that to be a negative. I want that to be a very exciting thing. So as you're looking forward to January 1st, I want to encourage us to fast. I want us to remind us who God is, what God has done, and what God has promised that he will do. And let's come together and let's commit our church, our families, and ourselves as individuals to the Lord. And I believe it's going to be an exciting New Year's Day service. And I believe God's got some great things for us beginning that day and moving into 2017. Well, listen, I know this has been a little bit different Bible fellowship class, and I hope that it's been a blessing to you. I know that even as I read through some of these things, I've been challenged, and I'm excited about what God's going to be speaking to me about over the course of the next couple weeks. So again, I hope you had a really great Christmas and got to spend some time with your family and just focus again on what we've been talking about in our Bible fellowship series, about looking at the baby, not just a cozy little infant, but as the true Messiah. And let's really sort of put all of those concepts together as we prepare to kick off 2017 on our New Year's Day service. Have a wonderful week. God bless you, and we'll see you on the 1st.